Hey everyone, welcome to the Underswell. I'm Derek Sabori. Thanks for being here. All right. Well, hey, we're live. Casey, welcome to the show.
Oh, so glad to be here.
Man, we had a great conversation a couple weeks ago, and you and I had first connected at an event, the Coast Film Festival. What do they call it? That was the Coast Summit, right? This was a gathering of change makers. You guys were there. StokedPlastics was there. On a panel. I was on a panel with James. You had some really nice things to say about the panel. We connected. You followed up on LinkedIn, and here we are.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be here. I mean, just watching you moderate that panel, I really enjoyed it because it's like you oftentimes see people moderate panels and it feels forced, and the people on the panel feel a little uncomfortable, but you just made them like they felt comfortable. And as an audience member, I just felt the pure enjoyment, not only hearing what they had to say, but then also just, just kind of watching Michael Jordan do his thing as a moderator.
Oh, geez.
Comfortable up there.
Well, thank you so much. That did really make my day. I think I followed up and it was so nice and genuine and thoughtful and I think it's important to do that, right? To let people know when you appreciate something, because that really, really hit me in a kind of a sweet spot. I was like, dang, that was nice. It felt really genuine. You'll get that a lot. If you do panels, people are like, oh, great job. But it felt like you took specific time to say, hey, that was really good. I really appreciated the way you do that. And I want to let you know, like, hey, that really meant a lot to me. Like, it has really stuck with me. I was like, man, that was really thoughtful. So I hope to go out in the world as well. That reminded me to like, hey, if you appreciate something from somebody, like really let them know, not just sort of like, hey, good job, but like you did it differently. So thanks for that. Yeah.
I mean, that's a good takeaway. If you see something, say something. And I just really enjoyed watching you do your thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Well, I'm going to try to do it today. We're going to try to replicate that.
Right.
Casey, you're an operator, a growth strategist. You're currently serving as the chief operating officer at StokedPlastics. Maybe tell us a little bit about StokedPlastics. I could kind of ramble off the headline here, but maybe tell us a little bit about the work you guys do and what product you're offering.
StokedPlastic, essentially, we take recycled ocean-bound and ocean-found plastic, and we recycle it to the highest degree in the injection molding space and put it back into hard goods. We focus on the outdoor industry, but we talk to folks in the automotive, the engineering, you name it, kind of wherever plastic can be used, we can really make a difference. I guess kind of simply put is we kind of created this plastic glue that allows us to take recycled plastic water bottles, rebuild the DNA of that plastic, strengthen it to the point where it's like a virgin plastic again. Mm-hmm. And then we put it back into new things so that people don't have to use new oil in their products.
Yeah, and that's kind of been historically, that's been the problem, right? It's just not as good of a plastic, so it hasn't been able to be applied in the places that we want it to. So I know you guys are using it for eyewear, which is Apollos, one of the other brands that you guys do, goggles, and it's made for products. It's an exciting space, I guess, because you're sort of disrupting that whole space. So that's got to be kind of cool and fun to work on.
Yeah, it like the genesis of the company is very interesting, but essentially, when the plastic was created, it was really hard to prove that need. And so my partner and the founder of the company, James Merrill, he basically created this eyewear company as a proof of concept to show that the plastic works. Mm-hmm. Obviously the plastic works. The eyewear is really great. We won a bunch of awards. We started beating some of the biggest brand names that you probably wear around. And when we started doing that, the entire industry started taking notice, and we ended up getting inbounds from different folks to say, hey, who are you and how do we use your material? And that's when we kind of formally incorporated the company StokedPlastics, and now we're piloting for some of the biggest brands in and out of the outdoor industry right now. So very exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and it's fun to kind of keep an eye on what you guys are doing and keep seeing whether it's awards or grants or different things that you guys are getting recognized for. So congratulations.
Thanks.
Casey, you're sort of known for leading sustainability-driven operations, partnerships, finance, supply chain innovation. I know you help brands scale smartly. Is this the kind of thing that you're doing there this is a two-part question. Is this what you're doing there at StokedPlastics? And how did you meet James? How did you guys meet? How did you guys come together in the first place?
Yep. That is Everything you said is what I'm doing here at Stoke Plastics. I met James actually kind of randomly. I met him through LinkedIn. His profile said he was from Maine, and I've always had a very special place in my heart for the outdoor industry. And I just saw what he was doing from an outsider's perspective, disrupting that industry with the plastic innovation. I reached out just with some pleasantries, no expectations. It turned out that he actually lived right around the corner from me in Los Angeles, in Venice, and we grabbed a coffee, and kind of the rest is history. He was looking to get into the Techstars program with Stoke Plastics. I've been a lead mentor to the Techstars LA ecosystem for, probably 5 years now. And so, kind of helped shepherd that process. And as soon as we got into that, or he got into that accelerator program, I hopped in with both feet.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, that's an accelerator program for entrepreneurs and startups, just to kind of help get guidance, or is it a place for getting funding, or both?
Both and. So there's a convertible note that's associated, so you get a certain amount of money, but then you get access to their entire ecosystem of mentors, and then each accelerator program, depending on the location around the country, is led by a specific managing director that has, some sort of unique focus to help you scale your company. They introduce you to investors, they help you craft your pitch, and then it kind of culminates into a big demo day at the end where you kind of TEDx, a la TEDx, where you stand on a stage, you pitch your company, and you try to get some more traction from there.
Yeah, and that kind of gets us, this was sort of your wheelhouse, your world. So I want to dive in and kind of unpack that and rewind. But I guess maybe before we jump into that, is there anything particularly exciting that you're working on right now, or anything that's in the pipes that's worth mentioning over there for you guys?
I can't mention specific brands, but we're making tremendous headway with literally some of the biggest brands in and out of the outdoor industry right now, piloting various products throughout their verticals. So we're close to inking some deals. We've been able to secure two huge, we call them feedstock partners, but basically the collection partners that collect our plastic for us. There's two that we're very excited about, and kind of what makes us unique and different is that, the plastic things that you use, you probably couldn't tell where that plastic came from, but these companies have blockchain associated with all that plastic. So we know exactly to the lat long exactly where that plastic came from, so that we can tell you that story, that community story of how impactful that product is that you're making. So that's kind of on that Stoke Plastic side. And then on the Opolis side, we're actually getting ready to launch a Kickstarter in the beginning of June for a couple new styles of eyewear for sunglasses. We've had a great support system from the community, Instagram, etc., social media, and so this is kind of the opportunity to give back, to have them be initial backers of something much bigger, and so we're excited to kind of have this refresh as we move forward in the summer.
Oh, that's cool. That'll be exciting. We'll have to get the links to any of that. We'll put those in the show notes so everybody can kind of follow along. But let's dive into your career journey, your pathway, because I know it's been a really interesting one. And something tells me that maybe working in recycled plastics, as cool as it is, isn't maybe where you thought you might, be. You've got all these core competencies, like I mentioned, operations, supply chain efficiency, business transformation. You've done partnerships and negotiation. You've built up companies, you've exited companies. You're a military veteran, and thank you for your service.
Oh, thanks.
And I would imagine that some of these strengths may have been born there, especially in the Air Force Academy. That's a big deal, going through the Air Force Academy and then serving the Air Force. But what helped you decide that was your pathway? Maybe give us a little bit of a timeline of how you got to where you're at.
I think part of the theme that we'll talk about today is that success, or your journey, isn't linear. You've had past folks on your show that talk about this also, and mine is something similar. I think it probably started when I was a kid. My folks always instilled the values of hard work, don't give up, right? They had these, what I thought were kind of very silly monikers back in the day, like if you're going to do a job, do it right the first time, kind of measure twice, cut once, tough times don't last, tough people do. If you're going to eat if you're going to try to eat an entire cake, it's going to be overwhelming, but take a bite and then you'll be done with a slice. And then, progress makes that whole job complete.
Yeah.
And then I think that coupled with my older sister she was very good at sports. She set a very high bar for expectations of what it was like to be successful. And she ended up going to West Point.
Wow.
Which is obviously, it's just unique in itself for a female, but, so she set a massively high bar. And so when I was getting ready to go to college, I also played tennis at a high level. I wanted to play D1 tennis, and I didn't feel like I could go to a state school or something less than what West Point was, because I saw my folks and their friends and everyone around my community being so enamored by this thing that she was doing that I was like, man, wow, that seems to hold a lot of weight. I want to be that when I grow up.
Was there kind of a competitive spirit between you two, or did you just kind of always hold that her in that high regard, and you had that sort of respect for her older sister? Maybe both.
Certainly not the latter. I mean, we didn't get along super well growing up. We're best friends now. We were very competitive growing up, and I think that that has positives and negatives. But eventually, I landed on tennis because I played every sport at a pretty high level, and then I very quickly realized I was short and probably not going to be a professional basketball player, et cetera. And so, I got into tennis because she played tennis D1. And yeah, so I think that competitive nature between us ultimately was maybe a hindrance growing up, ended up making us really great friends as adults.
Yeah. So you go through the Air Force Academy, you get out of the academy, and what's sort of the early? What are some of the early jobs, and how do you eventually get into startups and being an entrepreneur?
I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. My folks were entrepreneurs. They still run a sunscreen company that is award-winning after 42 years in business. My dad won Entrepreneur of the Year multiple times. We flew out to meet the President of the United States a couple different times. And
wow.
But that aside, as entrepreneurs, they were always involved very heavily in my life. And I figured that that's the kind of life I wanted. That's the kind of parent eventually I wanted to be. And so when I was in the Air Force, I think part of what I really loved about it was also what had me move on from that. And what I mean is like, I was working on very exciting technology within our satellite community, but it was years in the future. And so it was cool to work on cutting edge stuff, but I wasn't specifically seeing the fruits of my labor and whether what I was working on would have had value or not, because I might be long gone out of that division by that time.
Yeah, so it wasn't tangible. You weren't like, you couldn't watch it come to fruition necessarily.
Yeah, and I think kind of those two things motivated me to move on. And so at the tail end of my service, I went to business school, and then I hopped out of the Air Force. And I got out of the Air Force one day, and I went and worked for a defense contractor the next day, I put a suit on, and I essentially did the same job that I did in the Air Force, but I was a civilian. So yeah, and I did that for a couple of years, but eventually, I think it's always good to have a job while you're working on another idea. And so at nights, I was always tinkering with what I wanted to potentially try to do. And I was recently married, still am married, but my, I guess, fiance, wife now, but she was in law school, finishing law school, saddled with a tremendous amount of law school debt. And I was very lucky to have gotten, where I went to the academy, kind of free education, even though you're serving. My business school, I was very lucky to get a grant, a substantial grant for that. So I didn't have a ton of debt. And so I was looking at this community of people around me with a lot of debt, with no way to pay it off. And in my first kind of civilian job, I was tapped to go back to the Air Force, essentially, and teach a class to transitioning military folks getting out of the Air Force, and teach them how to make themselves, how to market themselves and their skills in a way that would be translatable to civilian employers.
Okay, so some professional branding, if you will.
Professional branding. And so I kind of got this idea. I was like, well, it's kind of like treating people like startups.
Yeah.
And trying to create a narrative around something that you might think is mundane or just a skill that you have, but it is actually very applicable and interesting to other people if you can put a unique spin on it.
Yeah.
This is a long way of saying it eventually led me into the first company that I started, which was a crowdfunding platform to help folks pay for their student loans.
So cool. And then that eventually, I mean, leads into different ones. And some of these you go through acquisitions. You get into CPG, you get into cannabis, beverages, tech space, and then ultimately into the outdoor space. I wonder if you kind of looking back on it all, if you've been, were you intentional in all of this? Is something I like to ask my guests, because I think you mentioned that your career has been nonlinear. But if you look back, do you kind of go, no, there was a strategy there. Like I knew. Were you an intentional career builder? Did you know at the time that you were building a career? Did your parents kind of plant that seed and say, hey, we're building a career here? Or were you just like, one thing at a time, let's just keep moving forward?
I think it's a combination of all of that. I mean, now looking back, it's very unique to have a small mom and pop company be around after 42 years. So kudos to them and everything they're doing. But I think the reality is people start companies, they close companies, they move on to the next thing. And I don't think I really had that sort of perspective. I was intentional about being an entrepreneur, yes. And I knew that the things that I wanted to work on, I wanted them to have a larger purpose because I personally believe the world kind of has too much stuff and it's not up to me to add more stuff to it. And so, anything that I was going to work on, I wanted it to feel like I was personally making a difference that had a higher mission than just myself. And I know that probably sounds a bit nuanced and maybe highly subjective, but that's kind of been my guiding force as to what I spend my time on is what I'm going to be doing going to make a larger difference at the end of the day.
Yeah. Is that sort of, if we look then at the work that you're doing today, I guess, so sort of what do you appreciate most about the space that you're in now? Kind of looking back, what do you appreciate about the work, about the role? And what do you think, I guess we've already talked about what got you here, but yeah, tell me a little bit about what you appreciate most about what you do now, the role you play.
Yeah. So look, I think that the value of my role and me specifically, I think is when you have a COO that's also been a CEO and founder, I believe you get the best of both worlds because you get a high level thinker who understands that nuanced strategy and the long-term vision of where you're trying to go. But you also have the operational know-how and the organizational capabilities to be able to accomplish those goals.
Yeah.
And I also, I guess, I personally kind of consider myself kind of a CMO and a COO's body. So I've really enjoyed the ability to kind of stretch those creative wings a little bit on our packaging, partnerships, etc. And that's been a lot of fun because all of my experience gets kind of wrapped into one. And when you are working with a partner or a company that values all of your different nuanced value adds, then that I think that's how as a human you feel like you are being valued and heard, and that's when you really want to give all of yourself.
Yeah. Casey, I feel like it takes I don't know, to be in these roles, right? To be at that level, an operator, a COO, working with a CEO, being a CEO, but selling companies, building them up. It takes confidence, and I think confidence takes time to build up. But I think, I wonder, is it the sort of the backstory that has given you confidence, whether it's, your Air Force training, that great pedigree, the MBA? Is it your personality? Is it how you were raised? What sort of gave you the confidence to pursue startups, pursue these roles, and to position yourself, because not everybody has it in them, to say, hey, I'm ready to be a CEO, a COO, or your CMO. You've put yourself in that position. Where does that confidence come from? How would you relate that to somebody, or what advice would you give them? How do you get there?
I mean, I don't think you're ever ready to do anything. So I think it's just having the confidence in yourself to know that you'll figure it out. Because
Yeah.
if I've learned anything, most people in the world are faking it till they make it. And having the confidence just to know that you will make it. You know, it seems funny, but back in the tennis team at the Air Force Academy, when I was a freshman, they had, and I have my T-shirt next to me that I was going to show you. But when I was a freshman, the seniors had this motto, and it was called "One More Round." And so at the end of long, grueling practice, we'd have to run sprints, and we'd always be like, "How many are we running?" And the seniors would always say, "Oh, we're just doing one more round." And then you'd do that, and then we're like, "Oh, we're just doing one more round." And so that one more round was essentially infinite. You didn't know how many you were running. And I think that mindset, it could have just been one round, but it could have been 20 rounds. And so I think that mindset to know and prepare yourself to know, okay, I have the resilience, the emotional, physical confidence in myself to last, a short amount of time or a long amount of time. No matter what you throw at me, I can figure it out. And then we also have this like funny little saying at the academy, which is like, you can do anything for an hour. And I've thought about that often in life, whether it's physical, emotional, or whatever kind of pain. It's like you can sit in the uncomfortable and figure it out. Even if it's learning a new skill or, having a tough conversation with a colleague or a friend or a loved one or whatever. And like just having that ability to just sit in the awkward and know that it'll be okay.
Yeah. That's a good reminder to be able to tell yourself, it's like, you can do this. I can go one more round. I can do this for an hour. How did you, let's talk a little bit about successes and failures, because I like this idea. I remember you told me you've got this concept that you remind yourself to have a short memory span. And when you look back at sort of I'm sure looking at your resume, there's been successes, some good things that have happened. I'm sure there have been maybe some setbacks or failures, learnings, whatever we want to call them. What are some of the things? How do you handle those? And what are some of the memorable ones for you?
I mean, I fail every day. So, I mean, and I win every day.
Yeah.
Right? Life is a series of highs and lows. I think if I had to distill it down to one thing, I think maybe learn that sometimes your initial solution for like what it is that you build isn't necessarily how it's going to be used, or like there may be an unintended consequence or use case for the thing that you're ultimately dreaming.
Okay.
What that means to me is, I mentioned that I had built that crowdfunding platform for student loans, and I was like, man, what a great idea. Everyone's got student loans. This is going to change the world. And it was a very unique, and I think at the time it was like the second or third crowdfunding platform in the world.
Oh, wow.
Now there's like, I think 10,000 different kind of platforms, but our unique value prop is that the money that was raised went right to the banks or right to the institutions. So there was no misappropriation of funds. Mm-hmm. I was like, man, I figured this out. I took all the risks out of it. But the reality is the problem was also my problem. Everyone has student loans. And so to get people's campaigns to look different than one another was very hard. Everyone ended up looking the same, even if they did very different things. And so I was like, man, we have this cool technology, but it's kind of dying. What do we do? And so I looked at nonprofits, and I kept getting all these letters from these nonprofits that you open up and then you throw away, and they just seemed like dinosaurs to me. So it was like a very easy way for me to go into these nonprofits and places that I cared about and say, hey, I can give you a very instant internet presence that you can fundraise on, that you can, give tax breaks to the folks that are donating to your causes. Mm-hmm. And that took off. So where I thought this was going to be a place for student loans ended up being a place for nonprofits and other organizations to raise money. And so the underlying tech and that like matching capability was cool and useful. My initial idea just wasn't valuable at the time.
So it's being open to adapt, be nimble, and being willing to change, maybe not being stuck in your way, maybe, huh?
We talk, I think you said pivot, right? I think one of the hardest things to do is to pivot and ultimately to kill something that you've spent so much time on. And I think as an entrepreneur, a CEO, founder, what you build is your baby. You don't want anybody calling your baby ugly. But at some point, like if there are enough signals, you should listen to those signals. And sure, resilience can win out, and you can, have that comeback story. But it is hard to be like, okay, this didn't work. We're either going to pivot, shut it down, move on. Let's not throw good money after bad. And like that's a really hard decision, and also getting to the point where I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't do that because they think that the success or failure of their companies is a direct
correlation or
their self-worth.
Yeah.
And so they're like, man, if my company fails, I suck at this, and people are gonna think I'm a terrible entrepreneur. Vice versa, if I sell my company but I don't sell it for a certain amount of money, then I'm still a failure. So they take this self-worth valuation based on what they do, and I just think like it's not. There are so many nuances to success in business. It's timing, it's circumstance, it's the opportunity. There's so much luck is involved. You could have a great product, but the timing is bad. So it's just not a direct reflection upon you as a person.
And is that what you mean by having a short memory, where when something doesn't quote unquote work the way you wanted it to, let it go, move on, and don't let it define you.
Totally. I mean, it sounds funny, but even in college, I very quickly understood that there were classes or things you just had to take to pass, right? And some I knew I was going to need one day, and some I knew I wasn't going to need one day. So I just had a unique ability to be like, okay, I passed this test, I purged whatever that was, and I moved on to the next thing, taking the best of each experience with me and moving on. So I think that's the important thing, is you're taking the best and worst experiences, lessons learned, and you're taking them to the next adventure.
Yeah. Casey, what advice would you give to someone who wants to, kind of follow in your lead or footsteps, if you will? They want to be an operator, they want to be a strategist, they want to be a COO, a CMO, a CEO, or they're looking to pivot in their career. What's some simple advice you have for people in their career journeys?
It's a loaded question, Derek. Yeah. I mean, I think it does go back to success isn't linear. Try everything. It's a series of starts, stops, wins, losses, and you kind of have to accumulate all of that and take the good with the bad. And then, it's just being willing to try, I think. Because if you look at people's resumes these days, they are job hopping or moving to different things every couple of years. And that was not the standard 10, 15 years ago. And I just think that there's more of an ability now, and maybe an expectation now, that that's okay. And so that just allows, I think, people to find exactly what they're excited about doing. And maybe it's being an entrepreneur, but there's a lot of quote unquote regular jobs that you can be very creative and have that autonomy if you're surrounded by the right culture and management and people around you to inspire that stuff.
Yeah. But I think going back to confidence, I think, you've got to believe in yourself, right? You've got to know that you can take on that next role, that you've got the ability to pivot. So I think that's a mindset for people as well. You had mentioned as well that you've got to catalyze your own growth. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, nobody cares about your success as much as you do, hopefully. And things aren't going to change unless you make them change. And so if you have a direction that you want to be, but you don't potentially have the skills, right? Like, it's take some classes, go to night school, network as much as possible to get your foot in the door and wherever or whatever it is that you want to do. Because success, certainly, at least for me, has never just shown up at my doorstep. It's always been something that I've chased down.
Yeah, you've got to build it. Kind of touching back on the military and college experience. This has been something I've been asking people lately, because you hear things now with people young deciding to go to college, whether they want to, whether they're not, whether it's worth it, the price of it, etc. What would you recommend to an 18 or 20-year-old kind of looking down the pipe of 4 years of college or military service? How would you pitch them on either way? You've been to both. So
yeah.
What thoughts do you have?
It's a great question. And obviously there's countries that require military service, and I won't weigh in my opinion on that specifically, but I think some sort of military experience is actually uniquely helpful for everyone. Not from specifically like a patriotic perspective, but it teaches you so many great qualities, like how to be a great teammate. Surely that you don't always get what you want when you want it. That you're physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, way stronger than you ever thought that you were. Because everything that I'm most proud of that I've ever done has come from some sort of adversity. As everyone, so many stories are similar. But what I would recommend is, college versus military. I think what the military does really well is they teach you a very specific skill. And I actually, I'm a huge proponent of technical schools, because you are learning something uniquely valuable that you can always sell.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually part of the hard problem of being an operator, is it's seen as such a general skill that it's not like you're an attorney or an electrician or something like that. It's not like you have a specific thing to sell. And so I think that from a safety perspective, is valuable, especially if there's like a specific skill that you are excited about.
Yeah. Well, the question is, it's out there for people. I'm fascinated right now because, my kids are in college and that's the route I'm pushing, but I'm always looking to get other perspectives from everybody and just get a sense of what everybody's seeing out there, in the marketplace. I like to always say that I would like to see young people either have to go into the military or work in the restaurant or service industry, because there are so many different things, to your point, all those things you can learn, but both of them kind of get you to operate under pressure, work in a team environment. You don't get to walk away. Like, you've got to show up, you've got to play, you've got to follow the rules, kind of know the game and play the system, and just and make it through a set, I don't know, kind of like a defined set of, what's it called? A shift, if you will, whether that's 4 years, 2 years, or 4 hours.
Well, I mean, you just said something that I think is super valuable, which is learning how to play the system. And I think that is the game of life. Whether that is using relationships to your benefit, or just kind of understanding the gravity of whatever situation you're in and taking it with a grain of salt, and sitting in that tough conversation because it either matters or doesn't matter, but you can kind of move on with your life after. But gaming or playing the system is a skill that I don't honestly think a lot of folks have, but you can learn to do that.
Yeah, you're right. And I think even if we call it gaming the system, but it also is just understanding it will help you get ahead and kind of recognizing where the levers and the dials are. It's like, oh, okay, that person or that place or that thing is what I need to kind of help moving forward. When you look back, I mean, you're an author now, so you've been in publishing, supply chains, operations, gaming, tech. But if you compound that all with the military experience, your MBA, what were some of the biggest lessons you'd say that you kind of can pull from all of those, if there was a common thread between them all?
You're hitting me with some big questions, man. We talk about this often. With my daughter, actually, and I would say that the common theme is probably maximum effort. It was actually really cute. Someone asked her the other day, if your family had a motto, what would it be? And it's maximum effort. And that to me has been a thread my entire life, but it essentially means that you're going out and you can't give any more than what you currently have. So you're not looking back and you're upset that you didn't try harder or study longer or sit in that uncomfortable place or whatever it is, but also knowing that maximum effort doesn't necessarily mean success. It's essentially the bare minimum that everyone else that's trying to get ahead is doing. So if you're not doing that, then you can't expect to be successful.
Yeah.
So I'd say probably maximum effort, and
How important? I'm gonna plant this for you because I know it's in when we talked about it earlier. But people and relationships, how important is that?
It's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Because people don't go away, for the better and for the worse sometimes. I can't count how many times I have either worked with somebody that has reappeared years later that I've worked with again, that's helped open a door, vice versa, because the world is a relationship-driven place. And, even trying to get a job, trying to get new partnerships, trying to get anything you want, tickets to an event, right? You got to know someone who knows someone.
Yeah.
And so you never burn a bridge. I try to be as polite and cordial as possible, and really, like, the people that I've either worked with or the teams that I've built, I've always tried to treat people with the utmost respect and kind of motivate them to do their best to essentially, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but
Trying to, what I think it's just what you're saying though is just, you're being a good person, you're building a good reputation. I couldn't help but think as you're saying that though, that for all of us, our next opportunity, your next job, whatever it's going to be, is most likely going to come from somebody that you had a relationship with, or that fed, kind of put you on the path to somebody else, connected you with. So those relationships are really sort of the threads in the web that makes it all happen. So like you said, you can't, if you're not, you need to be building bridges, like you said, not burning bridges, because every touch point is going to be something that moves you forward in your career, I think, way more than whatever's on your paper and your LinkedIn bio.
Unfortunately, that is the case. And every project I've worked with a past colleague on has been some of my most memorable, because when someone returns to you and wants to work with you again, that feels really, really special.
Yeah. Is there anything that if that now that maybe you wish you had known, that you might have paid more attention to kind of coming up through your career here?
Yeah, I think if I had realized how hard, I've had success in many different industries. And when I started out, I kind of started out to prove that operations is operations, no matter what industry. And I feel like I've proven that. I've gone through a number of exits, and the success that I've had is awesome, but it's really attributed to the teams that were built around us. And, so it's really props to them. So because I've been in all of these different industries, I think as an entrepreneur, that's fine because I've been hopping, but I think I wish I would have focused on a single industry, because it is really hard to hop industries as a not an entrepreneur. Because if you look at somebody's LinkedIn, whether it's outdoor industry or tech, take tech, for example, it's going to say Uber, Lyft, LinkedIn, whatever. They just go from tech company to tech company because it's really hard to break in industries, even if you're uniquely positioned to do so. I don't know if it's how the recruiters work or whatever, but if you don't have those buzzword companies on your LinkedIn, then they're not going to look at you to hire you in. And so if you're passionate about some industry or some industry, then focus on that, because it's really hard to jump into that if you start a career not in that industry.
I feel like that's its own episode, because you're right. Because I think a couple things that we've talked about, though, is this era of, it's like an age of pivots where you do need to be able and willing to kind of jump from one thing to another. But to your point, it is really hard if you're seeking that. I think if the opportunity comes up and you can do it, great. But there are risks that come along with it. So yeah, it's a kind of a nuanced thing. I can appreciate that, with what you're saying there. What's on the horizon for you guys? What's the latest? You told me a little bit, you've got this new campaign coming. So maybe I don't know, is there anything else that's for you specifically as you look out? What's out on the horizon for you?
Yeah, I think for us, it's building out that manufacturing supply chain that we have dialed in. It's we're also fundraising right now, so we're kind of pounding the pavement in every direction. Not only trying to secure partnerships, trying to build Opolis, but we're also spending a lot of time fundraising, talking to a lot of investors. We have a safe round that's open up right now, and we're trying to close that in the summer, and we're making great traction. But you never know with with the climate and with all of the different things shifting politically, like, who knows what's going to happen. So, but we have like a tremendous amount of progress and positivity.
Well, I'm excited to keep an eye on it. Urge everybody to do the same, follow along. Casey, people can find your website. You've got a great website that kind of highlights your about, the work that you've done, how they can get in touch with you, obviously on LinkedIn, etc. We can follow along at Stoked Plastics. But maybe let's wrap this up with, sort of the 3 things that you want people to keep in mind, especially those who are early in their career journey. And then lastly, as we close out, I'm going to give you sort of the mic handed over to you for your soapbox moment for either a shout out or a call out. But wrap it up with some advice, and then the mic is yours.
Okay, sounds good. Also, doing this live is way harder than I thought it was going to be. So,
You're doing great.
We'll chalk the fog up to that. But
hey,
yeah.
You said anybody can do it. You can do anything for an hour, right? For 45 minutes, you got this.
I didn't say you could do it well, but yeah. So I'm thinking of a couple. Maybe I'll offer more than 3, just like super quick. So maybe maximum effort should be the standard, but doesn't always equal success. This is one that's kind of guided me my whole life, which is like, if you act with integrity and you're proud of your decisions at the end of the day, basically, can you look at yourself in the mirror and be proud of that person? Then it really doesn't matter the outcome of whatever it is that you did. That one has been a guiding light my whole life. And then
I like that.
Have a short-term memory. Relationships make the world go round. And then, I think I was thinking about this, and this one's really silly, but I think learn Excel really well, because if you know Excel and you know how to manipulate it to a high degree, it will make your life endlessly easier. And I think that's a differentiating skill that a lot of employers and people undervalue and underappreciate. And if you can go in and quickly change the landscape with a couple clicks, I think that's super helpful.
I love that one. As a big fan of Excel myself, I'm always, especially to young people, I'm like, how do you not know? Like, you need to know this. Get in there, learn this. Yes, your math class is important. This is why.
I as a side story real quick, I had a CEO who came in. They brought him in from Goldman Sachs, high demanding, high functional guy, and he knew Excel inside and out. And I thought I knew Excel. And this is just a couple of years ago. And turns out whatever I thought I knew, I didn't know.
Wow.
And I had to very quickly increase my Excel chops, and I've never looked back and have been always uniquely appreciative of that experience. But to wrap it up, like you asked, I feel like I've been so fortunate to have the support system around me, to have my wife who allows me to do what I do, and it makes me so happy to build companies, to be around great people, to help continue to kind of spread that culture of love and respect and empathy and hard work and maximum effort to the different people that I get to interact with. And, I was so stoked to be able to chat with you today. And I'm just, appreciative that you had me on, man. Thank you.
Well, thank you for making time, because I know you're busy as you're building up companies and launching new products and just keeping busy with everything you're working on. I'm sure this is going to be one more kind of notch in the belt on the wall there for you, Casey. So thanks for making time. Thanks for the great stories, and we'll put the links in there so people can follow along with you. But great talking with you too. So thanks so much for doing the show with me.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek.
Catch you later. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the show. If you like what you heard, be sure to check back weekly, subscribe to the show, and if you want to be featured on the show, come hit us up at theunderswell.com. We'd love to hear from you.